Thank you very much, Robert. Ambassador John Bolton, former national security advisor under President Trump, is here right now. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Bolton. A couple of things. One, listening to Robert's report, the reshuffling of these troops. We spoke earlier to an IDF spokesperson who says this is certainly not any indication that the war will end anytime soon. Then you have Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit next week. What would you pull or glean from some of these latest reports that you could share with the American people this morning?
Well, I think some of this by the Israelis is intended to calm the White House down, and they can say some forces are coming out. But I think there are several other things at work. I think the nature of the fight inside Gaza has shifted. I think some of these troops are less necessary than they were in the opening weeks of the war. And being reservists, I think it's important for the Israelis to get as many as they can back into the economy so that the economy can continue to function. But I think there's another aspect here that they're not emphasizing, and that is I've seen reports that at least some of the troops being withdrawn will be moved to the northern border, the border with Lebanon, where tensions with Hezbollah's continued assault on Israel, really almost since October the 7th, may be picking up. So I think the Israelis want to make sure that they're protected on their northern border, as well as still being able to carry out the operations in Gaza.
We have seen a number of different countries galvanize, work together to protect Israel, but also in terms of these attacks in the Red Sea. A lot of attention there, blatant attacks on American troops and on ships affiliated with both Israel and the U.S. Are the attacks in the Red Sea and the U.S. response to this considered an act of war?
Well, I think the attacks on commerce in the Red Sea, which is an international waterway going to and from the Suez Canal, clearly do constitute an act of war against any of the ships that are being fired upon. And let's be clear what's going on here. This is not the Houthi rebels just deciding on their own that they're going to go after commercial vessels and our naval vessels as well. This is directed by Iran. The Houthis get their drones and missiles from Iran. They have fired at civilian targets over the past several years in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. This is not part of a Yemen civil war. This is part of Iran's ring of fire strategy. And that's why I think the U.S. and others who are concerned by what's happening in the Red Sea need to do a lot more than just what happened over the weekend, destroying 3 Houthi boats. I think these Houthi positions on the mainland have got to be attacked. And I think ultimately, given that Iran does not seem to be deterred by Israel, the United States, or anybody else, Iran's going to have to pay a price, too, if we're going to maintain freedom of the seas.
Well, and it certainly is a strong stance by the U.S. military. This is the first time you mentioned those 3 Houthi boats or vessels. This is the first time that the U.S. has killed members of that Iranian-backed group. So should we expect more deadly force from the U.S. military?
I think the answer to that is yes. If you want to stop the attacks, you have to make the Houthis and their puppet masters in Tehran pay a sufficient price that in their own calculus they say this is with the harm we're suffering is not worth the pain that we're inflicting. We are nowhere close to that point. Just as Israel has not deterred the Hezbollah attacks in the north or attacks on the west bank of the Jordan River, this conflict is a slow-moving but very broad conflict already. And I think if the White House doesn't look at it in the big strategic picture, we're nowhere close to the end of it.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.